Have you ever made a decision that destroyed not just your own life, but everyone around you? A single moment of weakness that unraveled years of friendship, love, and trust? My name is Natalie, and this is the story of how I lost everything in one afternoon, and why some people think I deserved exactly what I got. I need to tell you this story because everyone in my life has abandoned me, and I'm starting to question if maybe I really am the monster they all say I am. It started innocently enough. I met Thomas on a Tuesday night at Murphy's Bar during their weekly trivia competition. Watching him fumble through literature questions was almost painful. He kept glancing over at our table with this mixture of admiration and frustration every time I nailed another answer about Victorian poetry or medieval history. When I correctly identified Oscar Wilde as the author of The Picture of Dorian Gray while his teammate confidently shouted Shakespeare, I caught Thomas shaking his head and laughing despite himself. After we won by 37 points, he came over to buy me a drink. It was refreshing to meet someone who actually appreciated intelligence instead of being threatened by it. Most guys seemed intimidated when I knew more than they did about basically everything. The relationship developed naturally over 4 years. Thomas was pursuing his master's degree, and he was incredibly supportive when I transitioned from teaching high school English to building my online trivia platform. My channel exploded. From a few hundred subscribers to over 50,000. Suddenly I was this recognized personality in the trivia community. People would recognize me at competitions, ask for photos, tell me how much they learned from my content. Thomas was proud of me, but I could tell he didn't fully grasp what I'd built. He'd mention my hobby to his friends, not understanding this was a legitimate career now, that brands were paying me serious money. But whatever. Not everyone understands entrepreneurship. The only weird thing was how he'd occasionally check my phone. Twice over 4 years, claiming he was curious about my business stuff. Both times he found nothing because there was nothing to find. Then came May's wedding. May and I had been friends since sophomore year of high school. She'd been dating Tom since junior year, one of those couples everyone expected to end up together forever. When Tom finally proposed, May asked me to help with wedding planning. I threw myself into creating the perfect day. My online success meant I had connections with photographers, vendors, people who could give her deals in exchange for social media promotion. Tom was around for most of the planning meetings, obviously. He'd always been attractive, that's not something I'd ever hidden. Classic masculine look, athletic but not bulky, dark hair, intense blue eyes that seemed to look right through you. In high school, before he and May got serious, we'd flirted occasionally at parties. Nothing major, just harmless attention. But during wedding planning, something felt different. Maybe it was seeing me successful and confident. Maybe it was how I'd grown into myself over the years. Whatever it was, I could feel this energy building between us. Loaded glances. Moments where our hands would brush reaching for the same brochure. I told myself it was just nostalgia, just wedding planning emotions. It didn't mean anything was going to happen. The morning of May's wedding changed everything. I was getting ready in the bridal suite when Tom texted me, "Hey, can we talk before the ceremony?" I told May I was checking on the flowers and slipped out to meet him. Tom was waiting in a small conference room, still in regular clothes since groomsmen weren't getting dressed for another hour. The moment I walked in, the energy between us was electric. "You look incredible," he said. "Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself," I replied, trying to keep things light. But then he stepped closer, and suddenly we were having a completely different conversation with our eyes. "This is crazy," he said, moving even closer. "Completely crazy," I agreed. But I wasn't stepping back. And then he kissed me. It was like an explosion of everything we'd been pretending not to feel. 4 months of wedding planning tension, years of unresolved attraction from high school, the intoxicating thrill of doing something absolutely forbidden. "We can't do this," I whispered against his mouth. But I was pulling him closer. "I know," he said. "But I can't marry her without knowing what this would have been like." That hit me like lightning. This was literally the last possible moment. In 3 hours, Tom would be May's husband forever. After today, this door would be permanently closed. We'd been dancing around this since we were teenagers. It was now or never. The hotel room was just 2 floors up. We had time, privacy, and this overwhelming need to finally resolve something that had been building for years. What happened next felt inevitable. It was intense and desperate, tinged with the knowledge that it could never happen again. Tom kept saying how incredible I was, how he'd wondered about this for so long. Afterward, lying there while Tom showered, I felt this strange mix of satisfaction and melancholy. We'd finally answered the question that had been hanging between us for years. Now we could both move forward with clear consciences. No regrets? Tom asked as he got dressed. No regrets, I confirmed. Just closure. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. May looked radiant. Tom seemed genuinely happy saying his vows. I stood at the altar holding May's bouquet, feeling completely at peace with what had happened. If anything, seeing Tom marry May felt right now, like the natural order had been restored after we'd gotten that old attraction out of our systems. Thomas looked handsome in his navy suit, smiling at me encouragingly when our eyes met. He'd been so supportive during all the wedding planning chaos. During cocktail hour, everything felt normal. I mingled, caught up with friends, posed for photos. Thomas complimented how beautiful everything looked. But then during dinner, Tom came over to thank us for our help with planning. Perfectly normal conversation, except then he asked if he could speak with me privately about the photographer payment. We stepped into a quieter hallway, and suddenly the energy was intense again. I can't stop thinking about this morning, he said quietly. Tom, you just got married, I reminded him, though my heart was racing. I know, and I love May, but what happened between us, that was real too. We talked for maybe 10 minutes about how complicated everything was, how we'd have to be careful going forward, how what happened couldn't happen again but also couldn't be ignored. When we returned to the reception, Thomas was watching us with this strange expression. Everything okay with the photographer situation? He asked. Oh, it was nothing, I said quickly. But Thomas kept glancing at me strangely for the rest of the evening. During the bouquet toss, when I caught May's flowers, I noticed him watching Tom's reaction instead of mine. By the time we got back to our hotel room, Thomas was in a weird mood. Quieter than usual, asking random questions about the timeline of the day. I chalked it up to wedding weirdness and fell asleep quickly, completely satisfied with how everything had turned out. I woke up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom and noticed Thomas wasn't in bed. When I came out, he was sitting by the window, scrolling through something on my phone with this intense, focused expression. Thomas, what are you doing with my phone? He looked up with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold and calculating in a way that made my stomach drop. I know you slept with Tom. The words hit me like ice water. How could he possibly know? Babe, I'm sorry, I didn't, I started, but I was so shocked I couldn't form a complete sentence. Thomas held up my phone, showing me the message thread I'd forgotten was even there. After Tom and I had talked at the reception, he'd texted asking if we could see each other again. I'd responded without thinking. The messages were right there on my screen. Tom asking, "Can I see you again?" and me responding yes with the eyes emoji. Then a longer exchange about keeping quiet about what happened. Trust me, I have a lot more to lose right now than you do, I'd written, referring to my public platform and relationship with May. It was the only possible timing. We waited this long, Tom had replied. Then there were more messages. Graphic ones where Tom described what he'd enjoyed about our time together. Messages I'd responded to enthusiastically before falling asleep. Looking at those messages on Thomas's face, seeing his cold expression, I realized how bad this looked. Thomas, let me explain. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, he said, still scrolling. You planned this. You've been planning this for months. No, it wasn't planned. It just happened. Tom and I have history, and with the wedding emotions and the timing? Thomas repeated. You mean the timing of sleeping with the groom on his wedding day? When he put it like that, it sounded terrible. But he wasn't understanding the emotional context. Thomas, I know how this looks, but you have to understand. Tom and I needed to get this out of our systems so we could both move forward. It was actually the responsible thing to do. Thomas stared at me like I'd said something in a foreign language. The responsible thing to do. Yes, because now it's resolved. Now we can both focus on our actual relationships without this unfinished business hanging over us. Thomas stood up and walked to the dresser, pulling out his laptop bag. I'm taking screenshots of all these messages, he said. And then we're going home and you're going to pack your things. Thomas, you're overreacting. This was one moment. One mistake, and it's over now. One mistake, he repeated. You call sleeping with your best friend's husband on their wedding day one mistake. He wasn't her husband yet when it happened, I pointed out, which was technically true. Thomas looked at me with complete disgust. Do you hear yourself right now? The drive home was silent except for Thomas asking direct questions about logistics. How long I'd need to pack, whether I had somewhere to stay, if I understood he never wanted to see me again. When we got to our apartment, Thomas sat at the kitchen table and said, You have 1 hour to pack whatever you can carry. Anything you leave behind gets donated or thrown away. Thomas, this is insane. This is my home too. No, it's not. It's my apartment, my lease, my furniture. You've been living here, but it was never legally yours. 1 hour wasn't nearly enough time to pack 4 years of life, but Thomas sat at that table the entire time, watching the clock, making it clear he wasn't bluffing about calling the police. I ended up at my sister's apartment, sleeping on her couch, trying to process what had just happened. That's when Thomas really showed his vindictive side. 2 days later, May called me crying. Tom had confessed everything and she was filing for divorce immediately. But May mentioned details that only Thomas could have known. Specific things from our text messages, exact timelines. Thomas had called her and told her everything. How could you do this to me? May sobbed. On my wedding day, Natalie. On my wedding day. May, I'm so sorry. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. It wasn't supposed to happen at all. You were my best friend and you slept with my husband. May, please let me explain. Tom and I have history, and we needed closure before he committed to you forever. In a way, I was protecting your marriage by making sure there were no unresolved feelings. Protecting my marriage? You destroyed my marriage. She hung up and blocked my number. I called Thomas, furious that he'd interfered. You ruined their marriage, I told him. You had no right to interfere in their relationship. I had no right to interfere? Thomas said in that same cold voice. You involved me the moment you decided to cheat on me with the groom at a wedding I attended as your date. What happened between Tom and me had nothing to do with you and me. Everything you do has to do with me. We were in a relationship. You brought me to that wedding while you were planning to sleep with someone else. He hung up and blocked my number too. That's when things got really bad. Within a week, my social media accounts were flooded with negative comments, spam, fake reviews. Someone was systematically attacking my online presence. My follower count started dropping as harassment made my content unusable. My income disappeared overnight as sponsors pulled out. I had to stop posting altogether. Then May's family got involved. May comes from this big Irish family, and several of her cousins are in some kind of motorcycle club. One afternoon, 3 of them showed up at my sister's apartment. They didn't threaten me directly, but they made it clear I wasn't welcome in town anymore, that they'd be keeping an eye on me. That same week, Tom ended up needing medical attention for a broken nose and bruised ribs after the same cousins explained what they thought of men who cheat on their family members. I realized Thomas had orchestrated all of it. The social media harassment, May's family getting involved, the systematic destruction of everything I'd built. It was too coordinated to be coincidental. The scariest part was how calm and calculated he'd been about it. This wasn't someone lashing out in anger. This was someone who had planned every detail of my destruction. I ended up leaving the state entirely, moving across the country to stay with a college friend while I tried to rebuild from scratch. My online career was completely destroyed. Every time I tried to start fresh, the harassment would start again within days. It's been a month since everything fell apart, and I'm still trying to understand how my life got destroyed so completely over one mistake. Tom and I had genuine feelings for each other. A real connection that deserved to be acknowledged. The timing was complicated, but we were adults making adult decisions. What Thomas did was so much worse than what I did. I followed my heart for one afternoon. He systematically destroyed multiple people's lives out of pure spite. The punishment was completely disproportionate to what actually happened. People make mistakes. People have complicated feelings. That's normal human behavior. What's not normal is the kind of calculated, methodical revenge Thomas enacted. Now I'm living in a studio apartment 3,000 miles away, working minimum wage retail while I try to figure out how to restart my career under a different name. May's marriage is over, Tom is probably dealing with ongoing intimidation, and I'm essentially in exile from my own life. All because Thomas couldn't handle that sometimes people have complicated feelings and act on them. All because he decided one moment of passion deserved complete destruction of everything I'd worked for. I still don't understand how someone I loved and trusted could be so vindictive. The Thomas the first thought I knew would never have been capable of something so cruel. But apparently, I never really knew him at all.